do this. Come on. Now we're getting somewhere.
Hi guys, welcome to a Reinhardt VOD review. Reinhardt is an interesting hero because a lot of people don't see him as a complicated hero and expect to just shield their teammates and fulfill their role on the team. That's not necessarily the case though, so let's take a look at this player and see how their match goes. So their team comp consists of D.Va, Mei, Genji, Ana and Mercy. D.Va can combo quite well with Rein, as when he needs to take his shield down, D.Va can matrix to absorb the damage in the interim. Mei's wall can combo well with Rein, as she can provide good opportunities for a safe charge. Genji will be unlikely to see the benefit of having a Reinhardt, but the extra security for Ana and Mercy will be useful. The first thing we can see is an important attempt to build some early charge from Reinhardt. Although he doesn't have a Lucio, he wasn't too far out of position to get back to the choke in time. Unfortunately, the fire strike was a bit too early. As you can see though, by the time the enemy team approaches the choke, his fire strike is off cooldown, so he's not at a loss. As the enemy team approaches though, we can see a composition that will make it quite difficult for Reinhardt to build his ult. 1. They have a Roadhog. A good Roadhog will seize the opportunity to hook Rein as soon as he throws a fire strike, which really doesn't make the risk worthwhile. In this case he wasn't quite in position yet, which was fortunate. 2. They have a D.Va. She'll absorb those fire strikes all day long, so best case scenario, Rein will have to try and strike around her instead of directly in her direction. As you can see, Rein's shield takes heavy damage and needs to be recharged. The mistake this Rein makes here is getting behind cover to let it recharge, but then jumping back out. This meant that it would take Rein longer to build his shield back and give the enemy team more opportunity to make a push. Rein catches D.Va flying towards a point and decides to back off in order to assist his team. Reinhardt should never be the one to deal with flanking enemies, unless there's no one left to do so. He's not mobile enough and this leaves the choke completely undefended, allowing the enemy team to push forward. Reinhardt's options are limited in this fight. Due to not landing any fire strikes, he hasn't been able to build his ult yet. In this fight he tries to charge at least their Mercy to stop her from building her res. This isn't the worst play considering there's very little he can do overall.
That's a shame. Let's fall back to objective B.
Reinhardt starts off by keeping his shield down. The idea behind this, I assume, is to avoid letting it get chipped down before the enemy team is actually ready to commit. He really needs to start landing some fire strikes now though, as his ultimate could be pivotal in the next fight.
On spot.
Fortunately, Genji's ult shuts down the majority of the offense, and Reinhardt sticks to the point ready to be picking up any late offense. Fortunately, what follows is a lot of the enemy team feathering their push, so no one actually makes use of Roadhog's ult. Reinhardt is in a bit of a funny position here because he's not actually shielding his teammates, so it's a good idea that he drops his shield and actually engages D.Va.
Out of mech.
Rein makes a good decision to drop his shield here, as the enemy D.Va's attacks can easily be avoided, and the shield needs to be recharged ready for the next push.
I got my mech back.
This is an interesting situation, because Mei puts herself massively out of position. You can see Reinhardt starts making his way there in order to cover her escape, but it was a mistake. The risk/reward here is not good, and had D.Va not covered Reinhardt's retreat, he would have forced the early Mercy res to avoid the enemy team from capitalising. This death was inevitable. Rein's shield can't withstand an uncontested Pharah Mercy combo, and it made way for the enemy D.Va's ult. This is some good team play to see in Diamond and can be the difference between successfully taking the site and just repetitively wasting ults. Fortunately, Mercy was positioned well and allowed Reinhardt to come back into the fight. With the majority of the fight over, Reinhardt didn't need to be nano-boosted here, but he handled it well. It's common when people get nano-boosted for them to go out searching for the kills, charging off towards the enemy spawn in order to get some use out of the ult. Again, if you look at the risk/reward, it just wouldn't be worthwhile. Reinhardt should be looking to shut down the next push with his ult, so he should remind his teammates that he has it and he can combo with Mei. You can see that Reinhardt is looking for it, but fortunately holds off for now. Unfortunately, after this the enemy team are no longer grouped up and split push the point. It would have been reasonable for Reinhardt to just ult the 2 here, and then secure the kill with a charge instead of risking it and taking the Roadhog off the map, which is a terrible trade at this point and completely upsets the chances of retaking the point. Strangely enough though, the point is no longer being contested and Ryan gets back in position. Ult still in his possession, although Mei used hers. His ult here was good enough and messed up the enemy team's momentum, although not securing any kills. It's fortunate that Pharah came in so low here though, making for an easy shutdown. Reinhardt tries to put some pressure on the enemy team by throwing a fire strike towards Pharah. It's actually a good idea if you're fairly certain you can land it, as it helps the rest of the team finish her off, and considering their team comp, it's going to be difficult to deal with Pharah without everyone's contribution. Unfortunately, Reinhardt charges out of the blue here. It could have been a misclick because I see no justification for doing it, other than a super agile Lucio that has like a 90% chance of avoiding the charge. Again, I'll use the term risk/reward. Is it worth it? Getting back on the point, the Mei ult stalls it yet again, Ryan countering the enemy Ryan's charge and making sure he freezes on the point. You can definitely see here how split up the enemy team is and points towards Reinhardt not being a particularly effective pick right now, especially with D.Va absorbing the same soldier role that Ryan is absorbing, instead of dealing with the flanking enemies that are chewing up the team. As you can see, the enemies have made the decision to push from all sides, making it impossible for Reinhardt to cover his team completely. It's not long until he has his ult again, but he needs to build it fast. Unfortunately, instead of trying to outmove the enemy Reinhardt, he goes for another ballsy charge, which was certain to fail. Fortunately, a res saves the day again, and the nano-boosted Ryan can try and retake the point. It was a reasonable ult to try and shut down the enemy Mercy, but she just got to the corner in time. I think it was becoming clear to the player at this point that it was going to be very difficult to find the enemy team grouped together. Ryan tries to support an aggressive push by keeping his shield up as his teammates push out and try to shut the enemy team down. This doesn't really work as Reinhardt isn't quick enough to keep up and you're looking to shut the enemy team down with as much damage as possible. There Reinhardt wouldn't have been able to use his ult if he'd have received a swift damage that the team needed to put out. As we've seen earlier, Ryan also needs to focus more on building that ult, so it would have been good to get some swings in here. Ryan manages to dodge their Reinhardt's charge, but I feel like it should have been followed up with a counter charge. It's almost guaranteed to land and stops their Ryan from picking up any kills from their team's back line. Instead he charges forward with the intention of killing the enemy team's back line. Fortunately he catches Mercy in a tight space and gets some damage in, which is good ult charge, and then he really commits to the kill, finishing her off with a fire strike. It's good perseverance, but I feel like Reinhardt should have been the priority after the missed charge. Closing out the first half with a relatively good hold, although it felt like the enemy team missed out on capitalising on a lot of near team kills, but that's very often the way 2CP goes. Now, moving into the second half, my preference would have actually been to go with a dive comp. Dive comps do a better job of bypassing the choke and really splitting the enemy team up, giving their team a better chance of moving on to the second point with plenty of time to spare. A switch to Winston would have made for a reasonable dive comp in this situation, but everyone needs to be aware and prepared for that. This is further reinforced by the fact that the enemy team are also playing Mei and Bastion. Bastion makes for good fast ult charge for Rein, but it won't usually be enough to make him move. Fortunately, he outstayed his welcome in that position and Xayah
Fully
shots him.
charged, come on, go, go, go.
Reinhardt then moves on to deal with the enemy team's backline, killing Mercy as she had nowhere to fly to. This was rather odd though, because Reinhardt doesn't really fill the role of a backline killer, but no one else seemed to take the initiative to do it. Unfortunately though, this leaves his teammates exposed on the point with no real substance. He manages to get a 10 HP counter charge to displace the enemy team's Reinhardt from the point, and it did make it harder for them to retake. This actually gives their team almost 7 minutes to attack the second point. Surely that's possible.
Let's go to the top because of the Mei walls.
A bad start as the team decided not to use their momentum and instead take high
I can
ground.
shoot you, I can shoot
A
you.
weird decision as one fire strike would have enabled Reinhardt's ult and potentially cleaned up the point. This allows Genji to be focused and killed, stagnating the push until he returns.
Yeah, okay, the Bastion. We need to focus on it first.
I'll just get my complete 100 charge and wait for Mars at 80%.
Okay, my ultimate.
100% charge.
There seems to be some massive issues here with coordination as people seem to be pushing alone while Reinhardt's on top waiting for the team.
The Bastion on the floor.
What follows next is some very good decision making from Reinhardt, which is good considering we've seen some questionable decisions earlier in the game. He's aware that it's not logical to ult into the Zen ult, so the next best thing is to charge someone out of it. At that distance, Reinhardt is a pretty sure kill, which really ruins the enemy team's defense and will allow him to set up for his ultimate. Unfortunately, no one spotted the Mercy and she did manage the res. This is where some more questionable decision making shows. Now that Mercy has used her res, her only option is to try and get some heals or damage boosting in order to help the team retake the point. She stops being a priority target for someone like Reinhardt as he will struggle to catch her and waste a lot of time in the process, not to mention building her ult if she can spam her pistol. They reset back to the high ground and go in for a Reinhardt versus Reinhardt duel. The Nanoboost comes in and this time we see Reinhardt panic to make use of it. Charging with the Nanoboost can be risky because it's a fair bit of wasted time and leaves you exposed if you don't catch anyone in it.
Got nice and nice.
This was the case in this situation and allowed Bastion to take care of the rest of his team. Going back to high ground, Rein is one strike away from another ultimate, so once that's secured, they can prepare to push in. In this situation, Rein is way too passive compared to his team, leaving Anna exposed to take some damage. It's not necessarily Reinhardt's fault, because Anna shouldn't be playing so aggressively, but you can't just stand idle on high ground without applying pressure, because you'll be shut down quickly. Not to mention, damage to his team will build the enemy team's ults quicker than damage to his shield.
I'm just almost ready.
Going back in, I can see a massively missed opportunity to start the team fight off successfully. Reinhardt should have charged Bastion, as he wasn't set up and it would have been guaranteed kill, instead of using his ultimate just for that one enemy. The team fight is over and the whole team have used their roles.
Okay.
Once nano boosted, charging their Reinhardt before being charged is the only way to advance their team forward, Being charged wasn't the end of the world, but it kept pressure off the point and kept them from moving forward. The team's Genji seems to be adamant that he wants to engage without any pressure. Every time so far he's died, and it makes it much less likely for his team to take the point anyway. Given the time left, I'd say that Reinhardt should have approached this fight with the intention of using his ult, as it's likely the last fight he'll be part of, but with the Mei ult coming in, it's going to keep people away regardless. That being said, by some miracle, Genji manages to get on the point with his ult and contest, allowing Reinhardt to join in and successfully shut down the enemy team to close out for a win. This was an exceptionally close game, with a lot of failed pushes due to people being too eager.
Me down.
I wouldn't say a lot of the failures in this match fall to Reinhardt. With the momentum from the first point, it should have been possible to close the game then and there. Everything that followed was due to poor coordination and wasted ults. Had this game have ended in a draw, it would have been very, very disappointing. If we were to take a look at what this Reinhardt should focus on to improve, it would be landing fire strikes to build charge quicker, avoiding indecisive charges, so when you've got no fixed target, putting the shield down to deal damage in a defensive situation, because it needs to be done, you can't just keep it up and try and support the team when you're trying to shut people down, and choosing impactful targets when fighting, because actually you don't want to be caught off guard fighting someone in the backline when people need to be killed on the point. But they do currently do a good job of communicating and trying to round up the team, adapting to enemy teams' ultimates like we saw in the Zenyatta ult, and utilising Nanoboost without getting carried away. Thanks for watching guys, I'm interested to hear what you have to say about this, because Reinhardt's quite an interesting hero to review. If you'd like any of your VODs reviewed, please let me know. It doesn't matter what rank you are, just let me know. Thanks for watching.